Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jared.
All right, good morning. So, quick agenda. Wow, it is bright up here. We're going to talk about some sources for funding. Then I'm going to get into portability. So the first half of my talk should be applicable to just about anyone. The second half is going to be a little bit more Unity focused, but how to build applications that are rich natively, but also can be portable to other devices. And so real quick, first of all, who's this guy? Because you've probably never heard my name or my company. In 2015, I was at Microsoft, and I got to write my first HoloLens app on a prototype device. So that's what I wrote my first spatial app on. A year later, I was actually running the HoloLens hackathons across the United States and helping people build their first apps. Then I got to teach, a year later, I got to teach the Holo Academy. So partners would fly up to Seattle and learn how to build apps on the device. A year later, or actually 2019, doing the same thing again, but on HoloLens 2, this time flying around the world and helping partners learn to build apps for the device. And then that culminated in me becoming the global technical lead for the Mixed Reality Partner Program. So again, helping partners build apps on HoloLens, and then later, many of these partners took their apps and wanted to make those apps run on other devices as well. So I was with them for part of that journey. Got to spend a year working on Microsoft Mesh. I was one of the lead developers on that product. And then these days, I'm very proud to call some of these companies customers, and I help people launch projects on Mesh, HoloLens, Vision Pro, whatever device makes sense for them. So that's kind of how I got to this talk, and just wanted to share what I know. So funding sources, the easiest, the lowest barrier of entry source for funding is the hackathons that Meta runs. They've run a couple this year, and they're going to run more. Their intention is to run these about quarterly, and you can win up to $5,000. You can also win devices for your team. So not huge funding, but these are fun little events that you can join with very low friction and win some prizes. The big one of all of them is the Meta Lifestyle Accelerator, which was announced on stage just 2 days ago. I do know roughly the dollar figures. I'm not allowed to say what the dollar figures are, but they're many, many times what you can win at the hackathons. This is very much for non-gaming. So Meta does have things for gaming, but this is the first time that we have a large source of funding for non-gaming. You know, things like beauty and fashion and design, even dating in VR. So definitely a great source, and you can see them at booth 401. Interesting to know, part of their plan is to connect winners with venture capitalists. So not just the funding that they have, but potentially taking your project beyond what Meta offers. There is Qualcomm Pathfinder. It's been around for a long time. You can submit for it still today. I know that this project is, I don't want to say it's on pause, but there's a lead time for getting funding in this, and this is more about Qualcomm devices. So if you want kind of like, glasses on phones, or if you're really looking for enterprise, this is a path to talk to Qualcomm about some funding. And of course, different devices, different platforms, which is part of why we're talking about portability today. So last one, hackathons. I already mentioned the Meta one, but there are many great hackathons available. There's one being run by XR Bootcamp that has prize money right now. XR CreatorCon is in Germany, and this is another event where they're connecting the hackathon people with venture capitalists as well. And then I'm on the board of MIT Reality Hack. I'm part of the org, and I run the mentor program every year. This is a massive event. We had 600 hackers come from around the world. And there are prizes there, but honestly, a lot of these events are more about networking, raising awareness of the project that you're working on, and finding other people that are doing similar things. So would love to have any of you at MIT as a hacker or a mentor. So if you're interested, just let me know. So how do you keep track of all of these resources that I just shared? I saw lots of people taking screenshots, but if you bookmark any one thing, I would recommend that you bookmark this. This is the Reality Innovators Network on LinkedIn. All the resources that I just talked about have been published in this LinkedIn group at some point. I'm not going to say that everything there is high signal, but a lot of high signal stuff is posted there. So if you connected one place, I would recommend connecting there. All right, so let's talk about portability. And you can't talk about portability and XR without talking about XRI. And the first thing that I wanted to do with XRI is just help everybody understand how it came to be. So originally we started with the operating system layer, and Apple made ARKit and Google made ARCore, and they were two different platforms that did effectively the same thing in very different ways. And so Unity came along and said, oh, I can make one layer that unifies these things, and if I build a Unity app, then it runs on those two platforms. So if you built your app on AR Foundation, then it would run on ARCore, ARKit, you're good to go, and you could still do this today. You can still write an app that just targets AR Foundation. But then along came this thing called OpenXR, which was awesome for the industry. And OpenXR was originally around VR headsets. So think the Vive, right? But eventually other manufacturers did adopt this. Microsoft added OpenXR support to HoloLens. Magic Leap has added support for it, et cetera. And so again, Unity said, oh, hey, now that we've got AR glasses, this looks like something we've done before, right? So they created the XR Interaction Toolkit. And this library gives you things like teleport, grab, video pass-through, scene understanding, all these kind of building blocks for building mixed reality applications. But along the way, there's this little company called Meta, and they've been building an SDK for a very long time. They have an SDK all the way back to DK1, DK2 days, so long before Unity did all this stuff. And they've been building their own SDK all along. So you've got the Oculus Integration SDK. And Oculus Integration SDK has, oh, look, pass-through and grab and teleport. And what's interesting is that Meta, at the foundational layer, their drivers are built on OpenXR. So they use OpenXR at the driver level, but their integration SDK, unfortunately, is not compatible with XRI. So Oculus Grab is different than XRI Grab. So you can build an app on the Oculus SDK and it will run on Oculus devices, and that's awesome. But you won't necessarily have the reach to the other devices. I'll talk in a minute about why you would still want to do that. And Meta's not the only one kind of guilty of doing this. There's this little company called Apple that has done exactly the same thing. And obviously it makes sense. They don't want to have their device or their SDK stuck waiting on a third party to develop their SDK. But Apple has done some very different things in their SDK that aren't currently available or aren't easily available. They've added Swift UI. Volume camera is different than what's in XRI. So there are some very interesting things in what Apple's doing. Okay, so if you want to know more about XRI, number one tip on XRI is that what comes in Unity and XRI is not everything you should know about XRI. Unity has a sample project on GitHub that has way more resources in it than what you will just get by going in Unity and saying, build an XRI project. It has things like these wonderful steering wheel and knobs and joysticks and sliders and physically based push door with locking handle, claw machine, ladders that you can physically climb or teleport up and down. So these are all things that are part of XRI, but in the sample package, not in the library built into Unity. So make sure you check that out. But probably one of the most important things about doing portable code to other devices is this package called XR Hands. And this is something that Unity developed with Microsoft back in the HoloLens 2 days, and it allows you to interact with objects with your hands, pick them up, throw them, poke interactors, and all those sorts of things. And I was lucky to be part of Vision Dev Camp back in March. And so just wanted to show you a little bit about where XR Hands was on Vision Pro at the time. If you happen to be in immersive mode, so this is Unity VR, then everything worked great. We could pick up and stack objects and interact with all of the UI bits in XRI. But if we switched over to mixed reality mode, the story was a little different. Not quite sure what's going on there. And then we couldn't interact with any of the widgets. And the reason for this is the way that the Vision Pro handles focus. Like the operating system is responsible for where is the focus. There's this thing called spatial pointer, and XRI didn't support it yet. Good news is that XRI now has been completely refactored in 3.0 to support this correctly. And this QR code, recommend grabbing that if you're interested, because Unity did 4 awesome talks at GDC, and you have to have GDC Vault to get to them normally, but this is a private YouTube playlist that has all of them. So if you're interested in XRI, highly recommend checking that playlist out. Okay. So I just told you all this wonderful stuff about XRI, so why would you use a native SDK? And I wanted to talk a minute about some of that. There are things that native SDKs still make easier for you. And my first example is pass-through. So if you have an example of like, when I pick up a health pack, I want to tint the screen green, or if I get hit by a projectile, I want to tint the screen red. You could do that in both, but Oculus gives you a nice color picker. To do that on XRI, you create a material that kind of can tint the pass-through, but what they don't tell you is that material has to have a platform-specific shader. So you have to have an XR core, you have to have one shader for Android and a different shader for iOS. So it just is more complicated than having a color picker. Meta has also invested a lot in these building blocks. And although I think there's kind of like mixed feedback about whether or not this can take you all the way to the finishing line, they are certainly phenomenal for starting and prototyping your project. And for many of these funding options, you need to submit a proof up front. You need to have some kind of proof that shows that your concept is doable. So you can rapidly prototype something with blocks and use that as your submission for funding, okay? Some of these blocks are very advanced too. They have a block for voice chat, a block for co-location, which is how do I get 2 Quest devices physically in the same room to agree where objects are? And if I pick up a cube, can I pick up a cube and hand it to you? All those things are built into these blocks, which are huge time savers. All right, the last one I want to talk about is a very new capability that Meta kind of pioneered first. We've had planar tracking for a long time, so you could find where the surface of a table is or the surface of a chair, but Meta recently added bounds detection for all of these objects. So I can find the volume that a table takes up. And that was previously only available in Meta. And then that was recently added to AR Foundation 6. So now you can still detect these planar objects, but you can also detect these volumetric objects like beds, couches, lamps, etc. And then the latest Oculus SDK, or the latest update to the operating system, the device automatically detects many of these things. You don't have to manually outline them, which is really cool. So AR Foundation added support for this in 6 for how many devices? For 1. But at least it's a standard in the SDK. Okay, so if I go with AR Foundation 6, I can do bounding box detection on Meta Quest. But interestingly, if I go to AR Foundation 6, what can I do on Vision Pro? All of nothing right now, because Vision Pro doesn't currently support AR Foundation 6. So if I want to use AR Foundation on Vision Pro, then I can go with AR Foundation 5, but then now there's no bounding box support, right? So I'm stuck in this place where, what do I do today? Now, probably if I was starting a new project, I'd wait, I don't know how many months, 4 months, who knows, before Vision Pro is going to support Foundation 6. That's probably what I would do. But to talk about future-proofing and portability, I'll use this as an example. Okay, so how could we solve this problem? Anyone in here who has done Unity has used what Unity calls a manager. So you can think of like XR Origin or OVR Camera Rig. These are Unity components that you put in your scene that do a bunch of work for you. But what a lot of Unity developers don't know is that under the covers, these managers talk to something Unity calls subsystems. So there's a Unity subsystem for the camera rig, there's a Unity subsystem for plane detection, etc. This is actually a pattern called inversion of control. And you can implement inversion of control using your own tools. Unity does it through subsystems, and this is a great pattern for creating portable code. So if I wanted to do my own scene detection system, I can create my own, clearly. And actually, Microsoft did this for a lot of things in MRTK. They created subsystems for text-to-speech. They created subsystems for this performance panel, if you've ever seen that. That's actually a subsystem. So you can create them too. And creating them is fairly straightforward, although I will say the documentation on doing this is not great. There are basically three things you do for creating a subsystem. You define the subsystem. The subsystem has at least one provider, and the provider returns some custom data. So in this example, I made up my own scene subsystem, and I have a meta implementation of it and a manual implementation of it. On the meta side, I can use Meta's API to return bounded volumes. And then on any other platform, maybe I have some setup where the user can walk around and annotate boxes in their scene, and that's what gets returned. Okay? This is a plugin system. Unity has a way of saying, only load this subsystem on Windows, only load this subsystem on Android. So you can decide where your subsystem, which plugin basically gets loaded on which platforms. And that is a good way of taking this code forward. So question to you, I would say, is do you do portability now? We don't have updated IDC stats right now. This is the end of last year, but Meta owned 55% of the market last year. Obviously, Vision Pro's put a dent in that. Not a huge dent, but they have definitely put a dent in that. So if you're just going for funding by Meta and you want to launch on one platform right now, you can save a lot of time by just using those blocks, getting funding, and build for one device, and then do your portability later. But one of the really awesome things about the Apple platform is the open store. Anybody can publish in it. If you've done Meta up until now, there's this thing called App Lab. You publish to App Lab, and then apps kind of tended to die in App Lab a lot. Getting them from App Lab to the store was a very painful process. However, Meta recently said that they're going to stop that their intentions are to take down the walls between App Lab and the store, and to get to a point where publishing into Meta is more like publishing into the App Store. When this will happen, we don't know. Signs point to maybe by the end of this calendar year, but that is their intention. Okay? So, call to action to you. Determine how important it is to be portable right now. Do you need to architect it up front? Do you build your prototype in your first version and then do portability later? If you are doing portability, think about following the IOC pattern. Implement subsystems on Unity is a great way of doing that. Apply for funding, and then join those groups. Please, get in that Reality Innovators Network, post what you're working on, come to events like Reality Hack, and meet up with your peers and get feedback. Along the way, please encourage portability and interoperability. You are Meta's customer. You are Apple's customer. Let them know that you understand why they had to create their own SDK, but that making their SDKs portable is important to you as a customer. Okay? And then finally, if you'd like to talk more with me about Mesh or starting any projects in XR, this will take you to my LinkedIn, and I'm happy to hang out in the hallway and chat afterward. And I made it on time. Thank you.